We're shipping Mother's Day gifts with a rapid-fire round of questions. Ready?
Yes. My gift. Can you pack it?
Yep.
Ship it?
Yes.
Guarantee it?
Of course.
Oh, send gift baskets?
For sure.
Protect electronics? Dog-proof it? Return it if they hate it?
Yes, no, and yeah.
Are you the UPS store?
Hey, we have a winner!
Visit the upsstore.com/guarantee for full details. Most locations are independently owned. Product, services, prices, and hours of operation may vary. See Center for details. The UPS Store. Visit a store today.
It's the left versus the right. Debate. Heavyweight slugfest.
Left, right, left. This is the left versus the right. It's Saturday afternoon, a little after 4 o'clock, and we are going to talk to our first candidate to appear on this show. The others are too afraid to come down here. And it's Bill Spadea running for governor in New Jersey. But what we're going to do, Bill, is we're going to anoint you as governor right now.
Okay.
Friday, the Dow Jones average was down 3.88%. The S&P 500 was down 4.7%. Every day after the stock market, somebody says, so that's it. You know, you can start investing now. But it's not going that way. What do you think about the tariffs? What do you think about the reaction to it? And what do you think about the whole international situation where what really ignited the second fallout on Friday was China saying that they're going to match our 34% tariffs against them with their own against us?
So first of all, Governor, great to be with you. Thanks for inviting me on. And I love all of these conversations. I don't know why more candidates don't take the opportunity to actually have a substantive discussion on policy and issues. Here's the challenge, that in today's world, people react on the news of the minute, forgetting the day. You know, people react to the tweets, they react to the Facebook posts, and I think that we've got to take a longer view of the tariffs. So let's just talk about that for a minute, because the stock market's going to do what the stock market's going to do when a president utters one word and the Federal Reserve says one thing. You could impact stock prices on an hourly basis. I look at the long term, and I am generally a fan of the tariffs, and I'll tell you why. First of all, love the idea of external revenue, which I hope long-term is going to replace internal revenue. The idea that maybe we're going to get to a point where with our trading partners, you're going to start to see external revenue flowing into this country and have the opportunity to lower the burden on working and middle-class taxpayers. Now, prices are going to go up initially, no question about it. But let's face it, we have been dealing with cheap products from China for decades. And I think to wean the American people off of that and reestablish a robust manufacturing economy in this country has to be our long-term goal. And we didn't see any of that under the Biden administration. And I think Donald Trump has taken the short-term pain, and we're going to accept some long-term gains.
And a lot of this is really because we transferred from an economy that generated itself because of our production to a service economy where now our bills are being paid by foreign countries by companies that we have no idea who they really are. So, this is the left versus the right. So I'm supposed to respond right now with an angry...
You're supposed to attack me, right?
Angry retort. Now, I hurt my shoulder because they told me to throw a chair at you, but my shoulder's not in condition for that right now. So what we're going to do is to ask you, from my own point of view, I was actually surprised at this reaction. I thought the idea that, fair is fair, you tax us 20%, we tax you 20%, and that's what the tariff is going to be that President Trump set forth. And even in this first week with all of this turbulence, I can't say that, I have a lot of criticisms of the president, but I'm not someone who criticizes him all the time. Some action had to be taken in this respect. If he went too far, he can pull it back later on, but at least there's we are open for trying to bring our country back to the levels and sustain the economy that we had, say, after World War II?
Well, I think you and I are going to find a lot of common ground on this. I mean, I look at.
Oh no, that'll get me fired, Bill.
All right, well then don't worry. Well, there'll be plenty I'll say you can beat me up on. But I think you look back to when you were governor of the Empire State, and I look at the numbers in New Jersey over the past, let's call it the last 20 years. We've seen manufacturing jobs drying up. We've seen small family manufacturing companies go out of business, move out of state. I think New York and New Jersey have really shared a lot of that bleeding that has happened over 2 decades. And the way I look at it, right now in New Jersey, we are left with about 200,000 manufacturing jobs, down from, I believe the number was 500,000 just 12 years ago. So we've been crushed. And what's happening is, everything that we're getting is built outside of the states, outside of our state, certainly, and New York State. Yes, there's some manufacturing going on in the center of the country, but only now in the states which have really focused on creating those jobs by lowering the regulatory burden, lowering the tax burden. So in New Jersey, the way I look at it is, we've got all these big pharma companies. We ought to be making drugs in the Garden State. I don't know why, with all the
we have all the resources to do it.
We've got the manpower. We've got the transportation. New Jersey is now being flooded with warehouses, as an example. So the old family farm, because they can't afford to stay in business, which is unfortunate, and something that I am going to address directly by actually creating an atmosphere where family farms, we can have farm to school, farm to prison, farm to hospital, get people eating healthier and getting our food sources much more localized. So that's one of our goals, because you see warehouse after warehouse after warehouse. Nothing against the warehouses. They bring in commerce and jobs when it's Amazon and others. But let's face it, they're warehouses of goods that are made everywhere but the United States, and certainly everywhere but New York and New Jersey.
And I think that's what the president and those who support this plan are banking on, that will come to fruition at a certain point. Might not be, the next 2 or 3 months, but certainly I would say by the end of the president's first year, so next January 20th, we should have a pretty good idea of whether or not this is working. I will not be surprised if it does work.
It's a bold statement as a Democrat, but I also think, and maybe you agree with this, the Democratic Party, look, the Republicans have gone through their trials and hardships as well, but I think the Democratic Party right now is really 2 parties. It's the party of very woke, where we're talking about gender ideology, talking about DEI policies for business and government, versus that working class base of the Democratic Party, the guy that turns a wrench, the guy that is an electrician, a plumber, drives a truck. That part of the Democratic Party is not represented by the current leadership, and I think that's the problem. I mean, we see it in the Democratic primary on the Jersey side, where you got 6 candidates killing each other, and nobody has broken out. There's tons of division and discord, and I think it's because some Democrats who want to say what you just said, because you're looking at it objectively and in terms of the economy and job creation, not in terms of partisan vitriol and talking points.
This probably has happened in both parties from time to time, where you have this situation where one party narrowly beats the other, like in 1960 when John F. Kennedy narrowly beats Richard Nixon. But then what happens when the party loses? They don't just lose the election, they lose their minds. So who did the Republicans put up in 1964? And by the way, he was a very honorable man, but Barry Goldwater, and he won 5 states. Right. He just got wiped out. But then it occurs again in 1968 when Richard Nixon ekes out a victory over Hubert Humphrey. Democrats go wild, they go mad. Who do they put up in 1972? George McGovern, who won Massachusetts and Washington, D.C., and that's it. It's gone back and forth in that way. And I think it's one of the see, I'll tell you something. Once I heard that President Trump won this election right now, once I heard that, if I were the national chair of the Democratic Party, you know what I would have done? Nothing. I would have just let the Republicans come in and govern. if they are successful, we'll figure out a way to run against them. But if they're not successful, we have a golden opportunity. I did not understand all this attacking from the very first couple of weeks. And after a while, when you say something too many times, nobody can hear you anymore, and that's part of the problem. So I'm going to ask you to take your anointed governor hat that we gave you off and go back to being a candidate.
All right.
Tell us why you want to be governor of New Jersey and how your campaign's running.
All right. So I just want to address one thing you said, that you were right. Both parties have gone through it. If you think about Ronald Reagan beating Jimmy Carter in 1980, and then what did the Democrats do? All of a sudden, it's Walter Mondale.
One state. He won Minnesota
and
at 1:30 in the morning, to the point that they were clapping in the newsroom, and Tom Brokaw had to tell him to shut up.
Yeah.
Because you're not allowed to be
Don't show your bias.
Showing your bias at that hour of the morning.
Think about that.
It's exactly the same problem.
And if you think in terms of 81 and 82 and the recession and the fact that Reagan's poll numbers took a hit, you could have predicted disaster in 84, but instead he made some hard choices. By 84, very popular because it worked. I think you're right about the same thing here, and I look at New Jersey in a very similar way, that the opportunity is huge. I'll use an example of congestion pricing. So everyone went crazy when Governor Hochul talked about congestion pricing. We're going to do it. We're going to charge $8, $9 a day to come into Manhattan. The challenge and the opportunity, one of my opponents, putting my hat on as a candidate in a primary, who was the nominee last time, he's been running for governor, this guy, for 9 years. He spent $25 million, and he can't get out of the 30s in his poll numbers, and it's a nightmare for him. And his response to congestion pricing was, we're going to fight back, and we're going to have New Jersey congestion pricing. And I said, what the heck is wrong with you? You're going to gouge working class people for no reason, for a political fight? My thought is that New Jersey benefits when New York raises taxes. We saw this happen when Brett Schundler back in the 90s was mayor of Jersey City, and he came in and took advantage of the high taxes in New York City.
Right.
He said, bring your businesses into Hudson County, and a lot of businesses did. Now we call it the Gold Coast if you look at Hoboken and Jersey City. So the opportunity is there when other states make mistakes. But for me, I'll tell you, Governor, it's personal. I've got 2 great kids and a great son-in-law. My daughter Elizabeth lives in London with our son-in-law Charlie. My son Michael's graduating from San Diego State in May, and we envision a time. My wife Jody and I have been married 30 years, and we made the Garden State our home. She was a Rhode Islander. We lived in D.C. for a time. We settled in New Jersey. It's where I was born and raised, and we love it. And we would love to have a time where our kids make the decision to come back to New Jersey, where we could hopefully participate in raising our grandkids in the Garden State. But right now, too expensive to buy a house, too expensive to cover the real estate taxes. Our roads don't get fixed. Our energy prices are through the roof. Food prices are through the roof. We've got radicals in charge. And I say this, the 2 problems New Jersey has, and it's why I'm a candidate for governor. One, woke Democrats who have really been radicalized over time, and they're wildly out of step with most Democrats you meet on the street. And weak Republicans who accept the status quo. They say, it's a 2-to-1 Democrat state. It's always going to be blue. We've got to take the crumbs off of their table. And I say, no. Ron DeSantis proved that wrong in Florida. Back in the day, you go back about 15 years, Governor Scott Walker proved that wrong in Wisconsin. All things are possible if you have a vision that people can relate to. And I'm a very practical guy. I started a group called the Common Sense Club while I was on the air, and I my show on 101.5
Mr.
FM.
Katzmatidis, the owner of the station, would like the name of your club because his whole mantra is about common sense.
Common sense. And when you practice common sense, when you lead with common sense, when you use common sense as a guide for how a policy is going to work, you find common ground with people on the other side of the aisle. And I'm very confident that we're going to earn, once we get through and win the primary, we're going to earn a lot of Democrat votes and a lot of independent votes that say, you know what, we need the potholes fixed, we need our highways to work, we need our energy costs to come down, and we need jobs.
So to that end, before you can run against the Democrats, you have to win the primary. And tell me about the primary race.
So for us, it's a battle against entrenched career politicians. I've got two main opponents. There are a couple of folks that got the required signatures and got themselves on the ballot, but they don't have any money and they're not really aggressively campaigning. Right. But it's me, John Bramnick, and Jack Chitterelli. Now, Bramnick is a friend of mine, even though we are on opposite sides of a lot of issues. He is a very liberal Republican, very anti-Trump, but he's a decent guy, and we get along. We actually have done a lot of different shows together to raise money for charity, et cetera. So we're friends. But we disagree, and we disagree publicly, and that's okay. But then there's Jack Chitterelli. Here's a guy that has literally been running for governor for 9 years. He ran for governor in 2017, lost the primary, ran in 2021, and lost the general. And here's the key, and this is why we're confident. When we looked at the polling of 2021, Virginia and New Jersey are the only two gubernatorial contests that year, and same thing in 2025. Glenn Youngkin wins big in Virginia, but Murphy, after having the highest number of COVID deaths, with the cost of living out of control, with the schools going very woke, with the lockdowns lasting longer than other states, all of those things against him, he wins. Here was the difference. And the polling numbers were almost the same, opportunity-wise, for Republicans in both states. The difference, in Virginia, 6 out of 10 voters turned out to vote. In New Jersey, 6 out of 10 stayed home. And I believe when you run a lackluster, weak Republican who, through his time in the legislature, he's been in politics for 35 years. I've never held office, so I'm the outsider in this race. He voted to increase the gas tax, the sales tax, the income tax. He voted to have men be able to change their birth certificate to reflect them as a female. So he is against almost all of the things that the Republican Party stands for, and has a voting record on it. So when he became the nominee, a lot of people just stayed home, and that's why we're running a very strong race in this primary, and I'm very confident. Well,
it's obviously a contentious race. I see a spokesperson for Mr. Citarelli called you a fake, phony, and a fraud.
How many of those? That was the nicest thing he said about me.
Yeah, exactly. In terms of that whole type of situation, running against each other in a primary or something like that. I'll tell you a quick story about when I was first starting out, and I'm running for the New York State Senate, and a friend of mine decides to run at the same time. So we had this meeting to kind of figure out if one of us would get out, one of us wouldn't get out, and there was a situation where in one part of the district, it was kind of known that the senator had to live there. The state senator had to live there. And at one of these debates, and there were like 10 of us running, someone in the audience got up and said, will I live in a different part of the district, will I ever see anybody who lives near me in the state Senate? And all the candidates are like, it's not where you live, it's what you do, and I'm going to make sure your neighborhood is back and forth. Yeah. They're all going on. And now it's my friend's turn. He gets up, and I thought he's going to kill them because he and I lived in the same neighborhood.
Yeah.
He gets up and says the same thing they said. Oh, I live there, and I'm going to win. So when I win, there'll be somebody that lives in this part of the district, blah, 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 blah. So finally, I get up, and I say, I think it's well understood here that this is a political deal. This deal is that as long as this senator is living in that part of the district, then anybody could represent the district, but they have to live there. Now, all the leaders have said that. When I got up and said I wanted to run for the state Senate, I was told this is a West Side seat, West Side of Manhattan. This is a West Side seat. Yep. They didn't say, it doesn't matter where you live. They basically were telling me you can't run.
Right.
So I get this. Like 8 people clapped. What I didn't realize was when we went to the next debate, the word had gotten around where I lived that I was the only one that stood up for the neighborhood. And when we had the next debate, I didn't even have to say anything. Those candidates got shouted down. They were challenged about why they did what they did. And that's, I think, a real lesson in it's not always what you think the vote is. Mm-hmm. It's what you think is right. And more often than not, being right about something will prevail over that.
I love that you said that. I'll tell you a quick story. We had a candidate forum, Democrats and Republicans. It was at the Diversity Chamber of Commerce. And they went down the line and asked all of us about procurement policies and hiring practices. And as they go down, even the Republicans, Chitterelli and Bramnick, they went full-on DEI. Yep, we got to make sure we get the set-asides for this group and that group and all this. They get to me. And I said, well, I'm going to sign an executive order on day one to eliminate DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, in procurement and hiring practices. Now, I got booed. It was, raucous, screaming, you're a racist, you're a fascist. I heard it all. And actually, that was from one of the Democrat candidates, Ross Baraka, the mayor of Newark, who was attacking me viciously, nasty name-calling, everything. So I ignored it, and I just kept going. And over the next 2 hours, I talked about where the real problem is. It's not awarding a contract based on skin color. It's saying, where are most of our black and brown residents living? Well, they're living in Newark, they're living in Irvington, Paterson, Trenton, Camden. And I said, the economic opportunity in those cities to build a business, to have access to capital, access to education, all safe streets, doesn't exist. And that's the challenge that we have. We need to build these towns up, and you're going to have mad competition. There'll be black-owned businesses, brown-owned businesses, everyone. If you create an equal starting point, now you're having a different conversation. So we go through the whole thing. The end, all the candidates file out off the stage, and I get into a discussion with the security guard. I said, listen, I'm not going out the back. I want to jump into the crowd. And he looked at me like, are you really sure that's a good idea? Right? I said, absolutely. So I go down the side step, and I get stopped by 4 young black high school students from Newark. And they said 2 things to me. One, they said, well, we can't believe that you were honest up there in this crowd, and man, did they let you have it. But 2, we agree with you. We're students in Newark. We know the opportunities don't exist. You're the first person to actually talk about the fact that 9 out of 10 kids in the Newark school system can't do math at grade level. What opportunity if 90% of the kids are not performing at grade level? What opportunity when you've got a 14-year-old kid that gunned down a police officer in cold blood just a few weeks ago, and the mayor doesn't even talk about it on the debate stage. So they understood my point. It was about lifting the economy for all people. And I don't know what that is. Is it Republican? Is it Democrat? I think it's common sense. I think it's compassion. I think it's real life. And that's the difference.
I think what happened in the case of DEI is we started identifying things by ethnicity, by race. And actually, it was what you just said. It's the neighborhoods. If the neighborhoods are not getting the right services, if the neighborhoods are impacted, as we've always done in this country, we try to come in and help out.
Right.
But we don't have to come in and help out because of how the people worship or what the people look like in those neighborhoods. We do it because it inevitably is going to affect the progress of the whole state and the progress of the whole country. Yeah. So since we found something to agree on, it's only, I think, right that we take a break, Bill.
Let's do it.
We'll be back in just a few moments here on WABC, the left versus the right. Today, the left and the right are sort of agreeing. So in the second hour, there should probably be some violence. So don't go away. We have a commercial break, and we'll be right back.
It's the left versus the right.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Your snacking routine can get a little dull. Time for an Oikos remix. Like a crunchy storm of sea salt praline pretzels, dark chocolate, and butter toffee, showering down into a smooth, creamy yogurt. Enjoy 3 Oikos Remix varieties with epic mix-ins and 11 grams of complete protein per 4.5-ounce serving. See remixyogurt.com.
It's the left versus the right. Debate. Heavyweight slugfest.
We're back on the left versus the right with our guest this week, who is Bill Spadea. He is running for governor in New Jersey. Now, Bill, we went through the first 20 minutes of this show, and I didn't say anything nasty about New Jersey like I did on Saturday Night Live. So I'm going to try to contain myself for the rest of the time we're talking.
Okay, I'll do the same.
In terms of the whole issue of how people are interacting with each other in this country right now, we kind of touched on it in the last segment, but there's really something very macabre, I think, about the way if someone says something and you find out what their party affiliation is, now you're supposed to hate them.
Yeah.
And I think it's killing thought. It's killing the idea of reason. It's killing really the purpose for why people sat down and wrote a constitution when this country was first founded.
It's a smart point you're making, and I think part of the blame is the media has become toxic, and I think that it has devolved into what is clickbait, because I'm going to capture your attention in one post on social media, one headline on an online newspaper source, or one 30-second bit on the evening news. And the more controversial, the better. And I think that's the problem. I think politics should be more about solutions. People have asked me, why would you run for governor? You've got, I had great opportunities. I had a show on Fox TV, on Fox 5 and Fox 29 in Philly.
Right.
We were, called Chasing News. Great 7-year run. Had a lot of opportunities to go on Fox News and Newsmax and all these opportunities, and to the point where we were even talking about a show on Newsmax. And then I hosted the #1 radio show, Morning Drive, on 101.5 FM in New Jersey for 10 years.
And we have a producer here today that worked with you.
And he actually worked there. How
Yeah.
cool is that, right? But I think that my show was different because I wasn't looking for gotcha interviews. I wasn't looking to create controversy. I was actually looking to have a conversation with people about solutions. And I found that when you looked for common ground in that 4-hour show, you actually had more people tuning in. And my market share when we left in some of those counties was north of 15. I mean, it was, the station has more than 1.5 million listeners. It was interesting too, Governor. It was evenly split. Democrats a third, independents a third, and Republicans a third, and half women, which is really, very unusual for a center-right show. You go across the country, it's 80% men, 20% women.
Right.
But I looked for a balance of politics, and then how it related to your family, your small business, if you're a teacher or a truck driver. And I got the idea to run for governor after the success of the show, and I thought, well, what if we could take these ratings and translate it into actual political action? That's how we started the Common Sense Club and Elect Common Sense. And we raised $1 million in the first 10 months. $11.14 was our average donation. So I thought, okay, real people are stepping up. They want change. And when I found out the Republicans were poised to nominate the same guy who couldn't get out of his own way last time, I thought, you know what? I'm going to run. And I want to change the conversation. That's why I said the same thing to the New Jersey Chamber of Commerce that I said to the African American Chamber of Commerce, that I said to the Diversity Chamber of Commerce. I just spoke the truth, talked about infrastructure and opportunity, and I didn't change my message because of the audience. And I think people really appreciate the authenticity.
Well, it is a campaign season, and when you're talking about the Common Sense raising all the money, Act Blue, which is a Democratic fundraising entity, is being investigated in a number of states right now on the theory that they raised a lot of money outside the country and then masked it to put it into campaigns. And they cite that Kamala Harris raised $1 billion or something like that the first 3 or 4 days after President Biden said he wasn't running for re-election. And I don't know if that's true or not, but the point is, it's how elections are run these days that are critical. I read some challenges that have been made against you about a way in which people were contributing to you, but when they contributed, it automatically registered them to contribute the next month.
Right. That was my opponent attacked me on that. The recurring donation.
Recurring donation.
So, a couple things on that. One, and I'm glad you brought it up because it's the subject of this horrible hit piece, which is wildly inaccurate, saying that we took advantage of elderly donors and we spent all the money personally.
Yeah, they had a woman named McClendon. She lived in Georgia, and she apparently made 6 contributions to you for $590
total.
And they
right.
Total. And,
so first of all, the recurring.
I will say, I read this piece. One thing I thought was a little kind of funny was that at one point somebody said that you made took $65,000 from a not-for-profit and gave it to yourself. But it was a not-for-profit you worked for. So it's like any other place that you work.
I'm glad you said that. Funny, they now the number's up to more than 200,000. Now they're saying, and my wife and I have talked to wow, where is that money? I don't remember getting that money. So where's all the money I allegedly made? With the money that we reported, I did everything above board. As a matter of fact, I made sure that the expenses, we didn't hide any of it, that I got reimbursed for everything I put out. Because you know what? I'm not a rich guy that had $65,000 laying around to just put into the cause.
Right. I'm
a working guy that works like everybody else. And, what that did was it saved us from having to hire $100,000+ a year executive director. I ran the group myself, but I needed to get some money back to recoup all I was spending on miles and gas and meals and travel and all that. So we're very confident that people see through that attack. But on the recurring donations, it's interesting. That is the best practice of just about every political organization out there. And it's very misleading the way Jack and his cronies have been attacking me, because you get warned on the recurring donations. Matter of fact, it's a pop-up that says, wait a minute, do you know that you checked the box for a recurring donation? And then before you get charged, you get an email that says, by the way, we're letting you know you can opt out at any time, but we're gonna hit you with another donation. And so there's enough warnings out there that this was the best practice. By the way, of the same group attacking me on it, they did the exact same thing, which is pretty funny. We don't do it anymore, though, by the way. We took it upon ourselves, even though it was perfectly legal and expected best practice in the industry. We stopped doing it because we don't need to do that to raise money.
And even some of the good government people in the article said that it's perfectly legal, but what you want to avoid is confusion. And I thought that was fair on their part. Also, there was one guy who I read about. I can't think of his name right now, but his first name was Mikkel, and I can't think of his last name. And he said, I didn't know I sent that money to him, but he can keep it because he's a Republican. I thought it was the funniest part of the article. But you go through these situations in campaigns, where you have to defend yourself and these situations that come up.
The standard, it's a shame because the bar is so high that we actually even sent their last mailer to our attorneys because it was so wildly over the top. The accusation that I'm somehow taking money from some sad old lady and I'm lining my own pockets, just absurd. But the bar is so high that your opponents can say just about anything they want without repercussion. I think that has contributed to the vitriol, the personal attacks. But here's what I say. We're running a positive campaign, and we're talking about issues. I'm at the granular level talking about how we're going to lower people's energy bills, how we're going to lower your cost of living, lower your real estate taxes, provide parents with the power over what their kids are learning, and all these things. my opponent has been attacking me now for more than a year because he's got nothing positive to say. His entire campaign, he's spent now a couple of $1 million attacking me. Not only are the poll numbers staying very close, but it just shows he's got nothing to offer.
So you see yourself and him as the front runners in this?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I think that John Bramnick will probably be somewhere in the low single digits. He might break out. The good news is I'm running against two anti-Trump moderates, even though now Chitterelli is saying that he's pro-Trump after 9 years of beating the guy up. But that notwithstanding, and it was funny because I was on Sid Rosenberg's show, and Sid said, well, J.D. Vance changed his mind on Trump. I said, well, here's the difference. J.D. Vance actually went through this evolution and decided he was going to buy in and accept Trump's style and policies. What Chitterelli did was he beat the crap out of him all the way up to the primary in 24, giving money to Chris Christie, who is probably the most well-known anti-Trumper out there. And then after Trump won the convention, he's like, oh, I guess I better get on board. So one guy saw the light. My opponent just decided to lie about it.
It's amazing the transformation that people can make when the final numbers come in. The issue right now that is, I think, of great concern in this whole country is just the health of our economy. Mm-hmm. Do you see what's going on now as long-term or something that will abate itself and give way to production?
So if you're referring to the short-term pain where people are looking at their investment accounts and the stock market's down, not only do I believe that is short-term, but anybody in the markets will say these investments are a long-term strategy. You should be trusting professionals, putting your money where they recommend, and let it ride and let it grow. And I think the problem is that you get social media and mainstream media panicking people because the more people are scared, the more they tune in. And unfortunately, I think the media is driving a lot of this. I absolutely believe that the tariffs long-term are going to be fantastic for us because we're going to start to drive local manufacturing. I mean, I've said this for a while. I want to, as governor, drive local food production. I want to empower family farms again. I think our schools should be buying their food from the local family farm instead of this frozen, boxed, processed garbage that we're getting from across the world and across the country. I do believe that a place like New Jersey and eventually New York, when we get some new leaders in, will turn these economies around to say, why can't we create more energy? We should be self-sustaining when it comes to energy. That'll lower our bills. We should be self-sustaining when it comes to auto parts. I mean, I've talked to people at our Department of Transportation, maybe it's the same thing in New York, where they're worried about a tough winter because they're like, well, we can't really get all the parts we need to keep the fleet on the road because there's a 9-month to a year delay because of what we're getting from China.
So did I hear something? You were on the Sid Rosenberg show?
Yes. I've been on a couple times with Sid.
And you weren't insulted and he didn't yell at you?
Well, interesting. He yells generally. I think that it's hard to discern whether he's yelling at you or if he is just yelling. He is about as passionate as a radio host that I have ever been on with.
I see
He's
him.
A character, Sid.
I see him outside of the station from time to time, and he is very interesting. He's a real character, big sports fan.
Yeah.
So he and I get to
Well, he's a big proponent of Israel, and Sid and I get along. He loves Donald Trump now. I think he is weighing who he's going to support based on who the president likes more. I would like to get into a conversation of who's going to do the better job for the state of New Jersey.
The state of New Jersey.
I think that really is the criteria when electing a governor.
We're going to come back in a couple of minutes and close with what you would consider to be a better job in the state of New Jersey.
Great.
Our guest is the candidate for governor in the state of New Jersey, Bill Spadea. I'm David Paterson, who, as you all know, hates New Jersey, and we'll be back right after this.
It's the left versus the right. It's the left versus the right. Debate. Heavyweight slugfest.
We are back with the final session of our Saturday afternoon conversations that we have between 4 and 5 o'clock here on WABC. Right after this program, Vinny Medugno will be on with some music between 5 and 6. And then Cousin Brucey's coming on. So somehow my guest, Bill Spadea, who is the candidate of the Republican Party for governor, and I have got to find a way to make the next few minutes interesting. And so in that regard, I would just say that let's say it's November. Let's say you have won. Mm-hmm. What's the first issue you want to get after right away?
First thing we're going to do is address illegal immigration. And I'm going to strike down the 2018 executive order that declared New Jersey a sanctuary state. And that impact will be huge because you've got now an estimated 900,000 people in New Jersey who are illegal. And I've talked with Tom Homan. I've had him on my radio show. I've had the president on the radio show. And, you know, and we discussed it's a day one action. Strike down the sanctuary state. That will allow us to free up resources to work directly with ICE, directly with enforcement and removal operations based in Newark. But there's a bigger picture, and it is the impact on our schools, our infrastructure, our law enforcement. So the second thing I'm going to do, after we strike down the 2018 sanctuary state and then the 2019 Immigrant Trust Directive, which will empower our law enforcement to work together with the federal enforcement, we're going to move into other areas. I'm going to declare a state of emergency when it comes to public safety, and I'm going to suspend through the emergency powers of the governor, which are extensive in New Jersey, as we learned the hard way during COVID. Right. We're going to do this essentially in reverse, and I'm going to suspend what is known as bail reform. And the challenge with bail reform is all the good intentions back to 2011, which were, well, you had a couple of kids getting caught up on the wrong side of the law. They didn't have bail money. It was an economic injustice. Well, to solve that, they essentially threw the baby out with the bathwater, and we've lost all the opportunity to hold the perps. 9 out of 10 perps who are arrested in New Jersey are spun out sometimes in hours. So everyone's frustrated. Law enforcement's frustrated. Neighbors are frustrated as we have double-digit increases in car thefts and now an exponential rise in the number of home invasions that accompany those car thefts. So again, to me, public safety is not a partisan issue. So we're going to address illegal immigration. Then we're going to right away address crime. And then I'm going to pull us out of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which adds potentially double digits to percentage-wise to the cost of energy in New Jersey. And we're going to pull us out of that RGGI consortium to get control of our energy costs. The next thing we're going to do with energy is immediately green light combined cycle plants. We have one that is ready to go into operation. This is converting natural gas into electricity. And we've got to start generating power in New Jersey. We have a real crisis with power where you've got an aggressive, very radicalized government now that is pushing green initiatives. And as I've said on the campaign trail, and this will continue into the governor's office, the only green is the money that it's lining the pockets of the lobbyists and some of these international corporations. We're going to focus on natural gas producing electric plants, nuclear energy, green light some of these projects, even though that is a longer term process. It might take 5 to 10 years to get new reactors online. But to me, the governor should be thinking about the decades ahead. You shouldn't just be thinking about a short-term success and getting a couple of good headlines. But I'm going to use executive orders in the first 100 days to alleviate the pressure we have on energy bills, get control of our government, reduce the amount of time. I'm going to take, believe it or not, Governor, here's another one from the Democrat side. Every once in a while, Democrats have a good idea. And Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, had a great idea to reduce the time it took to approve licenses and certifications and approvals. He's got it down to days. We're going to do the same thing in New Jersey. And we're going to lock up the next phase of affordable housing because it's anything but affordable. It's just a crushing blow into our suburbs. And then I'm going to start negotiating with the CWA and the NJEA to reform our pension payments because right now it's $7 billion a year, and teachers are being told that in 10 years there might not even be a retirement for them. So we've got to fix that and do right by our teachers and our state workers and the taxpayers. It's a busy day one.
That's it? That's all you're going to do?
I'm sure there'll be a lot more than there'll even be other things.
You know, the one thing you said that I think really bears repeating is I have always been an advocate for bail reform. Bail is actually defined in our Constitution. We know that a person has to be given an opportunity to be tried fairly. Mm-hmm. But we also know that there's certain people who have been arrested 50 times, and 51, they're looking for bail, and they shouldn't get it because they'd violated it before. Right. And I think it's the real example of what has gone wrong at times in this country, where we honestly try to fix things and then we overfix them. And when we overfix them, we can't stand in front of a camera and say, you know what, we're going to have to change this because it's not working. Yeah. And that doesn't just with bail reform. I think that a lot of the immigrants in this country right now, theoretically, if they went back to the countries where they were born, and then went into the program where you apply to come back, I think a lot of them get left back in. You know,
I do
the
too.
Percentage of immigrants that commit crimes in political arguments seems to be that like half of them commit crimes.
No,
the reality
it's much
is
lower than that.
The percentage is probably a little higher than it is for the regular population.
They say it is. I believe it is, and we can judge by the fact that crime is massively rising in New Jersey, especially in areas of car thefts and home invasions. But to your point, my opponent took something I said wildly out of context about 7 years ago on my Fox TV show, that I said there should be a pathway to citizenship. Well, what they did in their ad is they cut out the question I was asked. Of course they did. The question was, if a guy came here legally on a visa, has a wife and 2 kids, they're in the school, he's paying his taxes, he's never been arrested, should he have a pathway if he ran afoul of our broken legal system? Because let's face it, I don't know anybody that thinks our legal system is working perfectly. It's not even working well.
I think it's great.
You know,
now you know one person.
All right, I know one now. Well, here's why I say it's not working, because I just use personal examples. My sister-in-law took her 10 years and $40,000 before she could become a citizen. I think that you got many workers who are, they're driving a truck, they're turning a wrench. They don't have $40,000 to pay a lawyer to stay here. So when they get caught up in the system and denied, who supports that? Who helps them? So I want to see that guy have an opportunity to continue to be a productive member of society. Now, the problem is Joe Biden opened the borders, and you got 7 million people that came in, and my wife Jody and I spent some time at the border. We met with the Texas Department of Public Safety, their version of the state police, and Homeland Security and Border Patrol, and you find out that it's the cartels that run the border crossing. So we have to get a handle on that. And in New Jersey, I'm going to cooperate 100% with Tom Homan and President Trump, and we're going to fix the problem in New Jersey, and that's going to alleviate a lot of the burden we have on our infrastructure, whether it's water infrastructure, energy, roads, law enforcement, firefighting, and our schools, all suffering under a crush of people that have come in because we're a sanctuary state.
And I think particularly where our schools are concerned, it's the type of education that we're offering that's causing the problem to a certain degree. This is my little issue that I believe the school should be open from 9 in the morning to 6 in the afternoon.
Okay.
Why do the kids get out at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon? Because we are still working from the agrarian calendar of 1880, when in those days the kids came home and helped work the fields. Yeah. They needed them there. Once that things changed, no one ever adjusted the school system. And now what you could do is, after the school program, you know, the after-school activities could be there, and maybe not all the families have 2 parents where one parent will pick the kids up. You keep the kids till 6 o'clock, And now it would give a single parent a chance to go and pick the kid up. And while the students are there, it would really be education as opposed to...
if we got back to education, because that's the real point. And what I've said is that the first problem is, why is every kid shamed into going to college? $100,000 in debt and no real life skills. I think a lot of these kids would be better served if we had internships and apprenticeships starting in 7th and 8th grade in middle school. Who's got the aptitude to turn a wrench, drive a truck, fix an engine, become an electrician? My goodness, you could get a kid out of high school. Within 3 years, they're earning $80,000, $90,000 a year with no student debt. So I want to change the mindset of our educators. And I think our teachers, and I've spent a lot of time talking with a lot of teachers around the Garden State. To be honest, I think they're underpaid. It's a shame that they are having to go into their own pocketbook to pull out $100 a week to buy school supplies. Meanwhile, the union leadership, boy, they're living large and they're spending millions and millions of dollars. That money should be going back to the teachers. But the only way to do it is we got to get control of overall spending. And it's controversial to say it, but it's just a word. But we're going to bring in NJ Doge. And what I mean by Doge is, why do we have, and maybe New York State has the same thing, but our cost per mile on road construction, as an example, a couple of $1 million. Then you find out it's not the prevailing wage. It's not paying people for a fair day's work. No, it's the government bureaucracy. 5 guys on a road crew, 7 state inspectors. What? How is that okay with that? We have something called the grass seed inspector. Listen to this. So their job is to make sure that they follow the DEP regulations on what grass seed has to be planted in what county to replenish what was dug up for the roadway, and they stay on the job for 2 months after. So when I tell you this is not Saturday Night Live, this is not the Babylon Bee, it's not the Onion, New Jersey's paying government bureaucrats to watch the grass grow. Those are the kinds of things that a Doge will uncover. And what I'm hoping to do with the money we save, and I think we can save between $5 to $7 billion, we should be able to fund tax refunds to get our real estate cost, or real estate tax cost down. And you do that by bringing in school choice. You do that by renegotiating the pensions. We should have new hires on a 403B program instead of what we have now.
Well, that is quite an agenda. That's all I can say. As the owner of the station, John Katzmatidis, says to some of his guests, is that we have a minute left. What would you like to tell the audience before we sign off?
I'd like to tell you this. If you live in New Jersey and you're looking for change, someone that is going to break up the status quo, someone that is not owned by the lobbyist or the special interest, you want to send in the Marine. I served in the Marine Corps, happily married for 30 years. I have started businesses. I've managed millions of dollars, managed thousands of people. I've got the experience, and most importantly, I understand the problems, and I've taken the time to learn the detailed solutions that we're going to need. You want the same old thing we've had for 30 years? Every candidate running except me holds office or has held office. It's time for change in New Jersey, and I believe
look
on
at
that change.
This. He's getting a phone call in a minute at the end of his closing speech.
That's it.
Thank you for joining us today. David
Thanks,
Paterson, along here with Bill Spadea. We hope we've entertained you for a period of time. And if you didn't like the show, I don't care.
And there you go. Thanks for having me on. This was great.